Good evening. I'd like to call to order the public hearing for December 4th, 2019, open at 7:08 p.m. At this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Is there anything to be added to that? And item 3, tabled report. I think council and I received some more information. We had asked administration to get us some more information from the last time so that we could better prepare for the public hearing. And at this time, I don't believe, Justin, did you want to, is there anything you wanted to add for council?
Good evening, Council. We do have a presentation if you'd like an updated one.
Well, I think we've already seen the presentation and we've heard from everyone in the community. And
Did you say it was an updated?
is it an updated
Just
presentation?
with the updated information. So
Okay, sorry.
we appreciate that Council has received a lot of information in the past 2-3 days. Would like to thank Alberta Health Services and AP as well as Wheatland Funeral Home for providing content and responses to the questions. So we have summarized as best we can the responses into 3 or 4 slides. So if you'd like me to go over that, happy to.
Thank you.
F5? Yeah. So thank you, Council. We are here to continue bylaw number 1916, which is to give second and third reading to the Wheatland Funeral Home land use change application. As you know, this application is for 202 Lakeside Boulevard, the current location of the Wheatland Funeral Home, and it's to add the use of a crematorium of a maximum of 1 chamber. Just some of the site context, as you know, it's in the downtown adjacent to a park, to some mixed-use buildings, a church, and residential. The proposed bylaw is to add the use of a crematorium for a maximum of 1 chamber. Public engagement occurred during an open house as well as circulation with the land use amendment. Positive feedback was received. It does meet some of our aims of the MDP in terms of increasing business in the downtown and encouraging local enterprises. And first, we looked at the many regulations that encompass this application. Just want to highlight a couple here. Oops, that did not work. Sorry, Council. Thought this was updated. My apologies. I'm not sure why this presentation did not update. Maybe what I can do is quickly summarize. Sorry, Council. Not sure why it didn't update on that. So I think the key takeaways from our end is that we've reached out to the Alberta Parks and Environment, who are the regulators of small incinerators. They specifically exempt crematoriums of human activity from their act. So I think that's the first key message, is that this activity is exempt from AP. Reaching out to them, they said based upon research in the past, and I think the guy said smart people with pointed hats, not sure what that means, but they basically said that through in the past this has not been regulated, and they do not have any concerns. What they do want to ensure is that any of the smoke or the emissions coming out meets the general air quality standards that govern all of the province. So, which means no more than 40% opacity, and I believe at 2 kilograms per effluent that is was released. We also reached out to the AHS and their industrial experts. I think here's the challenge, is that because crematoriums are specifically exempt, Alberta Health have general high-level recommendations on how air quality needs to be governed. They have numerous recommendations in terms of third-party studies and testing. Again, this hasn't really ever occurred in Alberta. There are no studies that are really present to compare studies to. So we appreciate Alberta Health Services comments, and I thank the applicant again that has gotten back to them with much of the information. The last page of the AHS comments and applicant responses, the attachment sort of goes through their final what they took away from the applicant's responses, and they've removed some of the ongoing requirements. We did also some research with the City of Calgary, and there are about 9 crematoriums that are in mixed-use areas and next to residential. Their land use bylaw does allow those to occur where there's only a maximum of 1 chamber. They have not received any complaints to date of these 9 activities. They don't see any issues. We've also done some research in terms of pyrox, so the actual unit that will be used. This is a very technologically advanced unit that promises to exceed environmental conditions. There's many maintenance requirements and inspection requirements as part of that. And as administration, what we're recommending to council is that as part of the development permit process, we can put in conditions of approval that demonstrate that the applicant are meeting the maintenance requirements on an annual basis as the unit manufacturer recommends, that they're demonstrating that they are CSA approved, that their staff has been trained, and they also have something that after 6 cremations, they want to get to a point where they've got the best settings for the unit to meet all the environmental conditions, and that we want evidence that those best settings have been met. There is also an option that the province of Ontario and also Quebec has, is that they do want source matter testing. Now, I do want to be clear that this is not part of the provincial regulations, as they are exempt, but as I said, my role is to give you the options to look at and for you to understand what every province requires for this use if you choose to go down that road. I have met with the applicant who may have some thoughts and feedback on that option, but again, my role is to represent the town and to give you all the options to make this decision. So we do feel comfortable that for council to give second and third reading, because we do have the tools in place through the permit conditions to ensure that the maintenance and the ongoing inspections and training, that to keep the actual machine in good working order, which really ultimately will determine the lack of emissions or the success or the high quality outputs of the product will be maintained. So that was my summary in the presentation as to the best of my memory, but
Thank you,
for your time,
Justin.
but
Thank you, Justin. And does council have any questions, considering that we got some new information in the last day or so? Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. So my questions relate primarily to the additional information that was provided by Wheatland Funeral Home, specific to pages 190 to 210 with regards to Appendix A, somewhat in Appendix B, with regards to the woods continuum in terms of operating parameters and the emission controls that they talk about. So I guess my question is, you talked about adding something to a bylaw that could talk to record retention, but it would seem to me that already within the parameters of the machine, the Pyrex machine that they're bringing in, it already has that capability. So that's the only question I have in all of this. So anybody wanting to seek out those records? from what I'm reading from this document, would be able to access those operating parameters, emission controls, and conditions of approval that were in that Appendix A and B, that you would have that on an ongoing basis. If Mr. Van Bussel could probably reply to this, Your Worship.
Yes, please, I would invite the
Yeah.
applicant up if he would like to respond.
Thank you, Councilor Peterson. The machine itself will keep track of the opacity and set off alarms for that sort of thing. It doesn't have an ongoing emissions monitoring system here. So the exact emissions themselves wouldn't be something that we would keep record for, or we would have record for, but whether opacity ever reached a certain level or any alarms that were tripped or anything like that, it would certainly keep track of those. So anything that is required in Alberta would be monitored and we'd be able to keep track of.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. Justin, if I could ask you, and I wasn't able to find it myself, but do you know if the Calgary has any requirement as to, like, with regards to the height of the stack of the chimney that is expelling these gases?
Through the chair, we didn't specifically look at the height of the chimney. My understanding of the Calgary bylaw is that the maximum height of the land use district, the crematorium would be located in, would be the maximum height of the building, including any stack. So we can certainly look into that for you, but my knowledge of the Calgary bylaw, that's how it would be interpreted.
Just, and maybe like maybe I'm misunderstanding that, but I believe like, the one of the woods study that was done, and it was on a bigger unit, but the stack height was 14 meters above grade, and so I'm just wondering what effect that, like, I'm assuming that would have some effect on what people are experiencing on the ground and what what is kind of being distributed closer rather than farther away. And yeah, I guess just because we don't have anything to compare it to as far as like other municipalities with stack height, I'd be curious. I guess it's tough to compare with the information we were provided with what we, because this will be a different setup.
Yeah. Through the chair, certainly that can be regulated and enforced through the DP process. We can certainly do some due diligence in terms of maximum heights and how other municipalities deal with it. We obviously don't want to create an eyesore in the downtown with a chimney stack, whether it can be like effectively screened, things like that. But we can certainly make sure that the screening and the optical perception, if that's the right word, of that can be designed appropriately.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Sobel, did you have a question?
It was answered, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? My question is, Alberta Health, when I read the report here, AHS said something about distance from a crematorium or an incinerator to a residence of being 300 feet. That was their comment. Are we in that with the residences?
Sorry, through the chair, I don't remember that.
You don't remember seeing that?
Specificity. I remember the AEP mentioned some comments that a municipality could look at residential separation distances.
Does anyone, the other councillors?
The last sentence of the AEP letter, which is the last attachment,
Yeah.
does have a comment about the could look at separation distances from residential, but again, based upon our research with the City of Calgary, and I think at the last meeting there was a site visit we went to in High River. There are no separation distances, but again, I mean, that would be up to council if that's something that you would want to implement. We would have to put that in the bylaw.
Okay, and the other thing I note here is that AHS said that they are unable to accept calculations on page 463. AHS is unable to accept calculations or equipment comparisons that have not been conducted by a qualified third party. Now, is that because the third party report on the Pyrox X1000. That report was paid for, that study was paid for by Pyrox?
Through the chair, I think they're looking for an independent third-party study.
So
of
AHS
a
is not
local
comfortable at this time?
context.
AHS is
Yeah,
not
I
comfortable?
mean, I think that's what I was saying, was that we have a challenge here because we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, is that because this use is exempt and there is no ongoing studies or monitoring or testing of this in this province, that data doesn't exist. So what they're looking for is they would preferably see a third-party study on this.
Okay.
I know the applicant took some time to go through some of the calculations, and I think his end conclusion was the apartment building next door has more CO2 emissions, as they have 6 furnaces, so he's done his own studies, which we're thankful for, and taking the time to do that.
Thank you.
But again, I think they're looking for a third party.
Thank you. And could I have a quick question to Legislative Services regarding procedure? At this point in the public hearing, can councilors make statements, or is it strictly questions of our administration and our staff?
Your Worship, it would be appropriate for questions in regards to the information presented, any statements you may want to make when considering the readings to the bylaw.
Okay, and that would have to be after second reading? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, no other questions for Justin? Thank you very much. And does council have enough information to make a decision tonight?
If I could just ask one more question,
Okay.
actually, of Mr. Van Bussel. So, like, given, I'm sure you've, and thank you very much for all this information. It's, very comprehensive. I'm just wondering, I guess, based on, some of the feedback and that, you've gotten and we've gotten from, like the AEP or AHS, is there any sort of extra steps that you're considering or that you're willing to take, I guess to kind of help, ensure that I guess, and I understand within the building and stuff like that, you guys will be doing a lot of monitoring and stuff like that. And, but just as far as is there anything you're willing to do, outside the building, or or is there any steps you can take, with stack height or something like that, to ensure that there won't be any issues?
Yeah, to be totally honest with you, Councillor Montgomery, stack height I know is a concern when it comes to emissions. There's no two ways about that. The higher the stack, the less the emissions are down sort of where the people are. The fact of the matter is that with emissions, any emissions that are expelled, whether it's from our machine or from a machine in the city of Calgary or in China, these stay in the air for long periods of time. So really, when it comes down to it, any emissions that this machine puts into the air, regardless of the stack, aren't landing in Strathmore. And while it's not great to say, well, now it's not our concern, the reality is that's the situation. Stack height, I can make it taller. I can't make it shorter to too much of a degree. I would have a concern about making it too much taller, as I believe, it would become an eyesore downtown if you're seeing it over top of the houses, that sort of thing. But I don't see anything so far that recommends that or that suggests that that should be a concern. As far as third-party testing goes, I have concerns with that simply because there's nothing to back it up here to say that that's a requirement or say that it's even necessary. We have the evidence from the reports that council was given back on November 13th. The equations are there. Again, it's simple math, and it wouldn't be 100% applicable here, which is the same thing AEP says in their email. They do, however, say that it is good information, that it's useful to have, and they don't recommend any other testing at this point. So I would have to see, or I would want to see reason for it other than simply just because it would cost us tens of thousands of dollars on an ongoing basis to have these tests done. And when we have this much evidence suggesting that it's not necessary, just because isn't necessarily something I would want to entertain.
And so I guess just to be clear again, you firmly believe that this will produce no visible kind of smoke aside from steam or something like that, and no odor, any of that, and so and I guess you would be willing to reconsider, or you'd be, like, if there was, you know, if it appeared that that was not the case, then you would kind of be willing to reconsider this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the machine, the laser that I mentioned, checks opacity of any emissions going out. Visible emission, I haven't found anything that any technical documents. Generally with, most I found is on diesel trucks, but they say anything visible is about 2% opacity. The laser on this machine is set to trigger, for anything that is visible, so that's always set once it's here. What I've been told is that the sensor is sensitive enough, or the laser is sensitive enough to actually just pick up on heat refraction itself going through the chimney. So there should be no concern. I mean, to be totally honest, and this is just coming from me, I would hate to have any smoke coming out of this stack downtown. It would look horrible on us as a business. So part of the reason we didn't ever explore this is because there is a crematorium just outside of Calgary that did do that on a number of occasions. I saw it, I know other people in town saw it, and that was enough reason for us to not consider this for a very long time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one final question for Mr. Van Bussel, if I may. You've gone to great lengths to develop a rules for operation of your crematorium, and it includes special consideration to noise. But I'm not sure from reading the report what the decibels are or how much noise is actually being contributed. So I was wondering if you could tell me how loud it is, and then whether or not that this actually needs to be in here.
It doesn't. I put that in there simply because noise is a concern. We do have a neighbor just across the alley from us, so it would sort of be dependent on them. We did a site visit in High River as well, to the same unit that we are installing. We were able to be in the room with the machine speaking at about this volume. 3 of us in there having a conversation for an hour without there being a concern. Outside of the building, they have a neighbor, a barber shop that's about 6 feet from their exterior wall. They hadn't complained. Realistically, if you were really listening for it, you could hear sort of a hum in the background, just like a furnace hum type of thing. It's not loud, it's not, you know, anything that would be obtrusive. It's certainly not like an air compressor going or anything along those lines, but the noise was there. And we'll do everything we can on the inside to mitigate that and make sure it's soundproofed as well as we can. But I did want to put that in there in case anybody had any concerns about noise, that it would be something that we are actively aware of and actively want to try and, you know, take control of as much as we can.
So you were not required by, through your discussions with Justin, to put this in? You've done this just as
As a precaution.
okay.
Yeah, so the unit we have is a little different than the one in High River, only in that we're putting a exterior on it, just so it looks a little nicer from the inside. So that if we do have families in there witnessing a cremation, it just looks a little better. This unit does house the blowers and the fans and whatnot too, so it does create some bit of sound muffling as well. So that's really what that is referring to there.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to mention with regards to Councillor Montgomery's question, and those things relevant to mitigating risk that just included in this report for information on page 462, section E of the Alberta Health request for information. There is specifically how the applicant will respond to future complaints and how risks will be managed in the future. And Wheatland Funeral Home does have a response that for our community in terms of addressing complaints or mitigating risk. It exists there for our information. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any other questions? And council, you now feel you have enough information to render a decision tonight? Then at this time, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the public hearing. Councillor Peterson,
Thank you, Your Worship. I move to adjourn the public hearing.
you've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. And I'd like to call to order the regular public meeting for December 4th, 2019, and we're opening the public meeting at 7:33 PM. On item 2, confirmation of agenda, are there any emergent items from any of the councilors tonight? Seeing none, are there any emergent items from administration? Jennifer?
Thank you, Your Worship. There are no additions or deletions. However, we would recommend that council consider the bylaw 1916, prior to moving into the remainder of the business of the regular council agenda.
So Jennifer, where would you see it would be best inserted?
Your Worship, we can insert
Right after
it.
delegations?
I would suggest that we insert it right before
Yeah,
delegations.
okay, thank you. So what would we call that? 5.0? It's not really a delegation. 4.1, okay, thank you. Any other amendments, Jennifer? Councillor, oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move to accept the agenda as amended.
Thank you very much. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. And that brings us to 4.1. And Justin, are you speaking one more time briefly to this, or? I know we've heard you recently in the public hearing.
To answer any questions, my apologies again why the presentation did not work, but I said we're happy to walk through again what the condition of approval we're looking for. We're happy to negotiate that with the applicant. If there's anything council specifically wants, we're looking for direction on that as well, so.
Thank you, Justin. Are there any more questions for Justin, or are there comments? I guess we'd have to have a second motion for second. Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I would move second reading of bylaw 19-16.
Thank you very much. We have a motion on the floor, a motion for second reading, which now allows us to have any discussion or comments. Are there any comments from councillors? Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to commend Justin Rebello and his team for working with Wheatland Funeral Home and spending considerable time on this bylaw and bringing forth some really good information to us, and then digging in even a little deeper and going in with AHS and AEP. I've asked my constituents for feedback, and I've received very little. And at this point, I don't believe it would be prudent of me to penalize the Wheatland Funeral Home for a lack of judgment by our government to really put emission standards out there for crematoriums. And for that reason, I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Any other comments from Councillor Sobel?
Thank you. First, I just want to say that this is probably one of the toughest bylaws that I've had to deal with. Certainly, it's the lengthiest. And I really appreciate all the information that we received. I want to be very clear on the fact that I feel Wheatland Funeral Home is a business, a company filled with very kind and considerate owners and staff. This is a business that exudes integrity and professionalism, and I do want to say that their efforts in our community are truly appreciated. I also believe that this is a project that is focused on doing a good thing for our community. There's no doubt in my mind that, and I fully support the construction of a local crematorium. The pain and anguish and difficulty that it would save people from having to travel to the city at this in their times of need is commendable, and I certainly support that. However, I am unconvinced that the location is the right one for a crematorium. There's comments, although not of a legal manner, but there's comments even from the Alberta Environment and Parks, and I appreciate that this is only an opinion, but the fact that proximity to residences is something that, and direction of prevailing wind should be, is something that should be looked at. I regret, and I certainly hope in the future that this comes before us again in a location that I can support, and one that is not as close to residences as this one is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I live in the downtown in not great proximity, not as close as Councillor Montgomery, but close. I have no concerns and have while I've not appreciated reading the tome that you sent me, I certainly did appreciate the information that was contained therein. I have no concerns about this being in our community. I think the presence of Wheatland Funeral Home simply does not change in its presence in the current location. It's simply an enhancement to it. I think that the access for people in the downtown and familiarity is an important consideration. And I do think that this business has gone above and beyond. And so I have no concerns with it being located in its current location. And my belief is that at some point they will be busy enough that they will be looking for larger accommodation. But for now, I'm convinced, Your Worship, that they have gone above and beyond the provincial and criteria. They have offered all kinds of opportunities to mitigate risk within our community through the processes outlined in E and how the risks will be managed into the future. And I am confident in their integrity going forward that this will be an excellent addition to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll without kind of repeating, I will echo Councillor Peterson and Councillor Sobel. I do believe that there has been nothing presented that suggests that this will be unsafe, particularly unsafe. But there's also been nothing presented that says that it is safe at the same time, as far as, you know, inhaling any sort of gases that might be emitted like this. And I guess what it boils down to for me is what the future of that area is and its proximity to future developments. And I have concern for the possibility that there will be bigger. There could be commercial buildings. There could be a restaurant. There could be even a taller apartment building of some sort located right next to it. And my concern has to do with, as Alberta Environment indicated, that like proximity to a residence, especially if it's like the same, if somebody happens to be kind of living at the same height as the stack or even a bit above or even a bit below, within, like as the one residence is, it's within about 40 feet. So I have concerns about that, and so, and as much as I really appreciate what the Van Bussels do for this community, I really do, and I appreciate all the lengths that you guys have gone to provide this information, and I hope that yeah, one day that you guys, and honestly, it's probably the toughest decision that we've had to make as far as the bylaw goes. But I can't support the current location as it's presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Any other comments from councillors? Well, I guess that leaves it to me. I appreciate everything that Wheatland Funeral Homes have done over the years and the fine business you've run. I've known Francis off and on for many years, and I know there's a great need for the crematorium services in Strathmore. I do have some concerns about the downtown core and this location. Some of the concerns I have, I've touched on briefly, that Alberta Health Services has some concerns. The other thing that was a worry to me was that report from Wood that I went through was funded by Pyrox, who makes the X1000. That, to me, that bothered me a bit. And the other thing that concerns me is the distance to residences, and this council and the previous council has worked to change and improve downtown, but also we've changed zoning bylaws to increase the density downtown. And so we're going to see more and more multi-unit housings coming about in taller buildings. So at this time, while I fully agree that it's time for us to have a crematorium service in town, I don't believe I can support this location. So we have a motion to give second reading to bylaw number 19-16, direct control for crematorium. Denise,
Well,
did
only if
you?
you allow it, Your Worship. You can always
Yeah, I don't
call.
mind.
So I have to say, Your Worship, I'm confused. Because I don't know ever when we've made a decision based on land use bylaws that don't exist. Because four-story buildings are all that can exist in the downtown, as far as I'm aware. This has been addressed in multiple levels of material that have come before us. They've addressed proximity to residences. I only know of one complaint coming forward in this entire community. And, you know, and as I sit here, you know, thinking that we are supposed to represent our community, that we sit here in service to our community, representing them, and we've had open houses, we've had all kinds of letters of support from the people who live next door to this, and one certified complaint in this neighborhood. I just, you know, if the land use bylaws change, then I guess we have a different decision to make sitting behind here. But distance to residences, change zoning bylaws, you know, changes to taller buildings that certainly don't exist beyond the four-story that exists right now.
If I could just interject,
Yes.
would you clear up for me the distance one that you say is not an issue? Because Alberta Health did mention somewhere in my readings today, I found that they felt it should be 300 feet from a residence. Glenn, did you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. The only proximity that I remember seeing, as far as 300 meters goes, and I think what it was coming from was actually a report that was presented last meeting that had to do with BC and what their recommendation was in Vancouver.
Well, I don't believe it was that, because
Okay.
I honestly didn't give any credence to BC because they have no real.
Well, let's find this then before we go.
I don't recall in all of the emails ever seeing anything regarding 300 meters.
Well, I know it came back to it in the very last paragraph from Alberta Health. It says in relation to emissions, the county, and I'm assuming they made a mistake and we're thinking of the town. It's from Alberta Environment and Parks. The county, very, very final page, 488. The county, which I assume they mean the town, may want to consider practical factors like proximity to residences and the direction of prevailing winds. Now, somewhere in my notes, I wrote down 300 feet, and I don't know where I would have gotten 300 feet unless I read it somewhere. And that was the concern I had, was I thought it was Alberta Health felt that an incinerator should be 300 feet away from a residence. And I wish I could find it now.
To the best of my knowledge, Your Worship, Alberta Health does not regulate this whatsoever.
I know they don't
Everything falls out,
I don't,
so
yeah, they
apologies.
don't have any regulations for emissions. I agree with you on that. Jennifer, I'm wondering if this distance is, obviously it's an important factor for Councillor Peterson, maybe we can take a brief recess and then we can try to find it before we go on with calling the vote. Okay, so we have a motion to take a
I would move to recess. Your Worship.
thank you. All in favor? Motion is carried, so we're in a brief recess. Okay, we're resuming the public meeting, and we're at a motion to give second reading to bylaw number 19-16. And Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you for letting me weigh in again. I just want to say that I have great reservations about this. I do believe that this is it's. Yeah, I like there's reasons for it, there's reasons against it. I do want to support, like I guess the development of this community, and I want to support businesses in this community. But I guess like for me, like I have reservations. Some of those reservations have been spoken to, and some of them have been kind of resolved by the information that was provided. Some of them are kind of like some of them are, I guess, a wait and see, and that's what I was referring to with, I guess what can we expect from Wheatland Funeral Homes in the future, and I guess Mr. Rebello, if I could ask you a question. What is the town's ability, let's say, if let's say there was any issues in the future with the crematorium, what is the town's ability to let's say, remove their ability to be a crematorium or suspend it?
Oh, boy. Off the top of my head, I'm sure Director Rycroft will jump in as well. He's got some experience. There's options of temporary permits, so temporary annual permit. I know talking with the applicant, it's a massive investment for this machine, so that would be a huge risk to them. Temporary permits is one. Not meeting the administration recommendations and not showing inspections and maintenance reports would be that they are in contradiction of their development permit conditions, which means that we have an opportunity to enforce or through enforcement do a stop order or cease of operation for that. Ryan, do you have something?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Oh, I got the button. There we go. There are some enforcement tools. I suppose I won't mince words. The town would not have great enforcement tools to enforce on this. Because the town doesn't have a sort of crematorium-specific bylaw and really couldn't establish one, we'd have to enforce by, as Mr. Rebello says, indicating that they aren't meeting development permit conditions. The enforcement mechanism through that is through the courts, which is a costly process. We're going through an order process now on a home in town for going through the full meal deal on an order process. It's realistically a 2-year process with considerable legal fees. And in that instance, it's a case where the applicant or where the person we're enforcing against isn't opting to fight us legally back. I would suggest that while we do have some controls, a lot of it would come down to voluntary compliance on the part of the applicant to maintain operations. If things got serious enough, the town would opt for full legal action, but there are costs that would be borne by the town going that route.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rookhoff. And so you're saying that it's possible to extend like a 1-year permit and see how things go, and then we could renew or go for a longer period at that point?
Through the chair, yes, that is an option. As I said, we did discuss that with the applicant initially, understanding some of the concerns. And as I said, the applicant were very clear that this is a significant economic investment for them. The risk of a year would be, but I don't want to speak for the applicant. They can respond to that as well, but that was my understanding. But that is an option we have, yes.
Okay, and I guess to speak to the Van Bussels, I can certainly appreciate the investment that you guys are making. I understand that. And for me, it's a question of just not being able to, I guess, see the future. Yeah, if you'd like to approach, yeah. And so, like, just I guess to be brief, I would support this, contingent on being able to review it, you know, let's say a year from now, and just to, you know that things are going fine, and then looking at a longer period at that point.
The concern I have with that, Councillor Montgomery, is that with the investment for 1 year to have the ability that, for us to put that machine in and then have you say, nope, sorry, we don't like it, and cut it off, isn't worth it to us. Over and above the legislation that comes in the bylaw here, we are governed by the AFSRB, which is a provincial body. If we are found to be, and I think their legislation is as simple as creating a nuisance in the town, if we're found to be doing that, they can actually pull our crematory license. So there are ways for it to be done, just it wouldn't be local government, it would be stepping up to the AFSRB and having them enact it. But there's certainly, like, they provide the license, they provide the licenses for us individuals, as crematory operators, as funeral directors. They have all authority to shut us down. So there is a recourse that isn't through the courts.
Okay, and I think that's a very important point to consider, because it's, and I guess it's heightened by the fact that AHS doesn't kind of have any sort of regulations, neither does, so the fact that it's kind of unregulated is what kind of makes it, tough to kind of come on favor of. But the fact that there is a body that does kind of, oversee it and can kind of restrict it, that does make me feel better, so.
And over and above that, with the funeral industry, we're used to dealing with what we call the ick factor, which is simply, we're dealing with things that you don't ever want to see. And the reality of the situation is, I don't want you to see it either. We move bodies in various stages of decomposition, whether it's injuries, whether it's babies or children. We deal with that, and you don't. We're right downtown. Those bodies are in our building. You never know it. So mitigating factors for the public to make sure that they're not dealing with this, that's our day in and day out here. So I'm not okay with there being any visible smoke. To heck with the 40% that the SRR allows us. Any smoke coming out is problematic to me. So I don't see, while I understand that the bylaws can't or maybe don't deal with that directly, our personal standard and the way funeral industry works, that's not the position we're ever going to put the town into.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Bauer.
I just want to say that, thank you, Worship, by the way, I'm sorry. The Van Bussel family and their team has done an exemplary job in our community. And I know that them bringing this to us at the time now, with all of the research that they have done and put into this proposal to apply for this permit, was done with a lot of intention. And I do not believe that accepting an opinion from AHS, which is not a governing body, and allowing that to sway your decision here, I just really don't see how that can have any bearing on a decision. The Alberta Environment and Parks with David Gower, he specifically says that they do not regulate crematoriums. And we cannot make a decision here and deny Wheatland Funeral Homes the ability to have a crematorium for what we think the government should be regulating. If they have not made any decisions on this, we cannot penalize them for our government not making regulations in this. And regarding enforcement, it is stated very clear that if there are any complaints, that people can call the environmental response line, and things will be taken care of. And I am very happy with the response that we've received from the Van Bussel family, that they care about our community and they care what people think. And I understand this has been a very difficult decision for me as well, but I have to go by the facts. And the facts that we were presented do not in any way state that I should deny you this permit.
If I could follow your comments. Justin, why did we seek out Alberta Health Services comments?
Through the chair, they're part of our regular circulation list.
So I don't
for
understand
any,
why we would
commercial
seek out their
applications.
comments and then turn around and say, we're going to ignore them and they're not going to be a factor in our decisions. We went to them for advice and their comments. And some of their comments say they have concerns. One of their statements is on December 2nd, they're unable to accept calculations or equipment comparisons that have not been conducted by a qualified third party. The AHS does not accept any information that's been provided that clarifies that a Pyrox X1000 can achieve Alberta ambient air quality objectives. So I am not in disagreement with you that I think everybody here feels the Van Bussel family has done an amazing job. But if we seek out input from Alberta Health and then say we shouldn't let it influence our decision, why the heck did we even ask them then? Because Alberta Health does weigh on my mind as far as their comments when I'm making
Through
a
the chair, if I could just
decision.
add one quick comment. We did talk to them about this. They accept that this type of use is exempt, as we talked about, but they also recognize that they are able to comment on a higher level, larger basis on air quality and health issues. So I said, for any commercial application, any application of this matter, AHS are part of our regular circulation list. We didn't specifically go out to them to ask this. As I said, they are part of the town circulation.
Okay, understood,
so-
thank you. Councillor Bauer.
If my husband is in the power industry, and, which is very heavily regulated. If AHS was asked to comment on the air quality of a power plant, they would not recommend that it be in the proximity of anyone either. And we have power plants all over Alberta. So I'm taking it with a grain of salt.
Do you know that for sure that they would say that?
Well, of course they would,
But
because
how do you know that?
the effluents are even more than what this crematorium are going to be putting into the air. Because they are highly regulated by our Alberta environment.
Through the chair, from a land use perspective, that's why these type of uses would be in an industrial area. Right, so that would be their response, right? So we did talk to the city about that too, right? About the differences between these type of uses being in mixed use residential as well as industrial. So there are some uses that need to be in industrial because they need to be far away from residential.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil?
Thank you, Your Worship. This, I guess, would be an opinion. But if Alberta Health Services, like, I'm just kind of confused there. If Alberta Health Services is kind of concerned about the air quality and stuff like that, why do they not regulate it? Do you know what I mean?
You mean the Alberta government?
Well, Alberta Health Services themselves, like, if they were actually concerned about what it's doing, there's enough. It's not like there's just like one random one here and there. Like, there are quite a few.
Is that their jurisdiction to regulate emissions?
But the quality and what they, if they're concerned about the quality and stuff like that and everything like that is happening around these crematoriums and stuff, I don't know why they wouldn't demand regulation.
Through the chair, the small incinerator regulation is under APE, and they specifically exempt human crematoriums under the small incinerator use. So something, I was having a conversation with one of our staff today that they have a farm that they have an animal incinerator. So that is regulated under the APE. So I think it's that they've chosen not to regulate human cremations. And that's their choice, APE. I don't think it falls under AHS.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I stand to be corrected, but I think we went to Alberta Health at our request last meeting. Not because there were any,
Approached in September.
they were approached, and I think that,
They were
that,
initially
Yeah.
approached in September, with a letter
and,
from September.
and I believe that when Renee de Molitar spoke to us, it was simply that they weren't prepared to comment on it because it wasn't within their jurisdiction, but if asked, they would move further.
To the chair, the first letter in your,
Right.
the appendix was the initial letter received
right.
when this item was first presented. I
Renee
believe there were
included
some
that.
questions from council as to whether AHS's comments had
Right.
been addressed because there was no follow-up letter. So we went out and tried
Right.
to address their comments.
So then they sent a series of questions to
Yes.
Wheatland Funeral Home.
Yes.
Which, in my reading of this, were adequately answered to their satisfaction. I would think that
There were a
that's
couple
what
of
it's-
points that
yeah,
that were
yeah.
outstanding.
Well, that they
and
couldn't speak to, I believe.
So now I've got my
Yeah, I'm just-
presentation up.
yeah.
Those were the 2 points that were outstanding in terms of the response that Wheatland Funeral Home provided. So again, it was the third-party treatment reports. They wanted third-party recommendations, and they wanted some more information about how the Pyrox X1000 specifically monitored particulate matter and rationale or why they're exempted. So those were the 2 outstanding items. from
Which is
Alberta
interesting
Health.
that they would ask Wheatland Funeral Home and not Alberta Environment, because that's where the question resides, not with Wheatland Funeral Home. So we can only then make decisions here based on personal opinion and all of the evidence that sits before us. We can't take out, I think it's not rational to take out things that are unproven, or are clearly exempted or are unregulated. So I think we have to make our decisions based on the totality of the evidence before us and not cherry pick.
And to the chair again, sorry, my last point with the administrative recommendations is that, so if you look at the Pyrox fact sheet, in Ontario and also Quebec, they do require source testing to be complete within 1 year. So to the chair, to Councillor Montgomery, talking about your 1 year time frame. If this is something, as I said, my job was to provide you with options and to provide you with how other municipalities or provinces doing it, notwithstanding it is exempted here. So I know that the applicant was quoting a large sum of money in the Pyrex report that you have an attachment. These testings are quoted at $5,000. So in terms of expense to the applicant, yes, absolutely, every dollar is a dollar, but we're looking at $5,000 within 1 year of operation and then $5,000 after every 5 years. So I'm just quoting the Pyrex fact sheet, which quoted that amount.
I have a question, Your Worship.
Councillor Peterson.
So in Mr. Rycroft's comments, he talked about enforcement goals being very difficult. You said because we don't have a crematorium bylaw. So you're speaking in reference to existing, not post, should this pass.
Your Worship, our community standards bylaw, when I made that comment, it was more so in regards to our community standards bylaw really isn't set up to regulate crematoria. That'd be the ideal tool for these because you can write an easy fine under that. It may be if council wishes to proceed with this bylaw that they could also recommend that, or ask that staff review the community standards bylaw to make some inclusions there, and we could presumably work with the Van Bussels on developing standards that could be inserted into the community standards bylaw. That's the ideal tool for enforcing something like this, because then you can just write a fine under it. You're not having to go through the injunction process like you would with a land use bylaw.
So then to Councillor Montgomery's points and concerns and relevant to that, on page 142 of 143 pages of our agenda package, or page 5 of the bylaw, under number 2, under section D, number 2, there would have to be then, if you did it in the way you're suggesting, or if that was an option, to include source testing under this process, it would be both in the community service bylaw and as well in this. It would have to be reflected in both.
Your worship, thinking about this, I don't know that it would fully be reflected. In fact, I almost wouldn't suggest we put matters regarding testing into the land use bylaw. It's just not a great tool for that. The community standards bylaw is the place to put it. That's a more active bylaw, for want of a better word. It's a bylaw that's, I suppose, used to enforce the active activities rather than fairly static land use activities. That sort of amendment doesn't require the full public process, so if council were to direct staff to move forward to that, it could be done in a timely fashion. It wouldn't pose grandiose delays on the project.
So can I have a second question, Your Worship? So my second question then, so regards to that, there wouldn't need to be a new hearing, or we wouldn't need to move into a new hearing. But if we went to a source testing process, or we were going to explore that as part of a future, then we would need a new public hearing.
No, Your Worship, you would not. It would just fall under our normal bylaw, for lack of a better word, normal bylaw reading process. So a public hearing would deal with land use issues only, not regulations on through the community standards bylaw.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery.
So I certainly like what Mr. Roycroft is speaking about with regards to the community standards bylaw. And so I guess I'm just wondering, so that we're fine to, I guess, vote on this, and then we can still, like, that could still be changed in the future, which would still kind of affect what we're doing right now?
Your Worship, there are a few options council has to proceed. If council chooses to grant the land use bylaw amendment today, that is, for want of a better word, that's permanent. It would require a public hearing process to get rid of the direct control zone, to revert the use back to a commercial use. So if council moves forward with it today, or, whenever, the Van Bussels would have the assurance that in some form or another, council gives blessing to the land use. At that point, the process would move into the development permit process, which is a process between staff and the applicant to determine the real particulars of the matter. Council could direct staff as part of this to, prior to the issuance of a development permit, that staff develop amendments to the, I'm hoping Jen's writing this down because it's, that prior to the issuance of a development permit, council directs staff to develop amendments to the community standards bylaw pertaining to crematoria operations and source testing, and that we move those forward for council adoption prior to the issuance of the development permit. That would allow some of the more bureaucratic processes that the funeral home operators still have to move through to churn their way through the system, while also giving staff an opportunity to, research and put together a reasonable bylaw. I'd strongly suggest staff work with the applicant to figure out what the appropriate bylaw is. We don't want to be taking on a degree of testing or something that's sort of well beyond the capacity of our systems to enforce.
Thank you,
So we'd
Ryan.
look for,
Thank you.
a reasonable
Does
setup.
that help you, Councillor Montgomery, that answer?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I guess
Thank
my
you.
question would be, seeing as how we're at second reading right now for this, and I want to, let's say, kind of move in that direction, what would be the process for that?
Your Worship, council would give both readings to the bylaw tonight, and then a new bylaw would come forward prior to the issuance of a development permit, is what I'm understanding Mr. Roycroft had just said.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peterson?
Just procedural question, but Councillor Montgomery's asking, should we proceed to third reading? Should third reading pass, could he then bring a motion forward relevant to what Mr. Roycroft was, and he could do that tonight? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I believe we've discussed this, and as I've said, it's been, as many of us have said, this has been the toughest thing for me. So I will call the question. We have a motion for second reading to bylaw number 19-16, direct control for crematorium. All in favor? We have 4 in favor, opposed? We have 2 opposed, so the motion carries. Councillor Peterson?
Move move third reading of bylaw 19-16, and I better get it fully correct this time, Your Worship.
Do you want to use mine?
I got it right here, if you're patient. Or maybe I better use yours. Thank you. The council give third and final reading to bylaw number 19-16, direct control for crematorium.
Thank you for that, Councillor Peterson. You've heard the motion. All in favor? We have 4 in favor, opposed. We have 2 opposed, and the motion carries. Thank you, council, for all your efforts. Thank you, staff and administration. And Councillor Montgomery, comment?
If I may, I'd like to make a motion. Jen, if you could put those words in my mouth for me.
I will try. So I believe council could make a motion that would state that council instruct administration to draft an amending bylaw to the community standards bylaw to include, thank you, prior to the issuance of a development permit, regulations. I've already said that. Okay, why don't you say it?
Don't need a mic. That council directs staff to bring amendments to the community services bylaw relevant to changes desirable to the crematory operation. Well, that would be part of it, possibly. But leave it to the experts too.
So now that we have that bylaw passed, we have a motion on the floor as per Councillor Peterson's comments. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you very much, staff, administration, audience. And again, thank you to the Van Bussels. We appreciate everything you've done in the community. I know this has been a confusing and frustrating experience for a lot of us, but we obviously all want to try to do what's best for the community and the residents. Thank you very much. And that brings us to item 5, delegations. 5.1, Chamber of Commerce. And yes, you have been very patient, Haley. So if you wouldn't mind to come to the center microphone area and just introduce yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
Certainly. No, thank you. Yeah, we're out of time. Oh. Absolutely. Yes. Good evening, everybody. Mayor Fuel, Deputy Mayor Corbeil, and Council. I can, thank you. Yes, we have an audience. Yes, thank you for that. I wanted to thank you first for allowing me to present this evening. I know that your time is precious and that everybody's got very busy schedules, so thank you for that. My name's Haley Poirier with the Strathmore Wheatland Chamber of Commerce, and I am representing them tonight to invite you all to a couple of upcoming events that are happening and that the Chamber are part of and hosting some of. The first one we're all very familiar with and getting very excited about, and that is Rogers Hometown Hockey. And I believe that Deputy Mayor Corbeil is on the task force with that as well, aren't you? Yes, that's awesome. So why I'm here tonight is because we all know about the economic development and the opportunities here for an immense amount of growth for our community, and the Chamber wants to support that. And with that said, we're busy organizing an event to take place in the downtown, and I won't go into all of the details, but I just wanted to to come here to invite you guys to it. A couple of things that we're doing. It's going to take place downtown Strathmore, and we're going to call it the Strathmore Hometown Hockey Kickoff. Yeah. December the 21st, which is the Saturday, from 8 until 11:30 that morning before Rogers we head up to Rogers to see what they're all about. And some of the details in the background, your chamber are busy approaching all of the downtown businesses. We're going to have a Paint the Town Red contest where we're going to invite all of the businesses to participate in a decorating contest. We're going to have judges out between the 15th and the 20th to the storefronts to judge them, and we will find out the results on the 21st at our event. The event itself, some of the agenda is going to include from 8 until 10, we're going to have a free pancake breakfast. Thank you to the Strathmore Lions for that. At 9 o'clock, we are going to announce the winners of the Paint the Town Red contest. At 10, this is where you guys come in. We're hoping that we can have celebrities and dignitaries come down for a ribbon cutting for the kickoff itself. Between 9:30 and 10:30, we have a hockey skills competition, and we're inviting all of our young players of all ages, from the Timbits to the U18s, boys and girls, to come and get involved in that. We are very excited that the Wheat Kings and the Double A's are going to help coordinate a lot of that for us. From 10:30 to 11:30, we're going to have a s'more tasting contest. So thank you, Councillor Bauer, for this idea, as well as we've approached her, and she is going to be a judge for us that morning. Yes, it should be a lot of fun, and we're going to be inviting all of the town folk to come, all ages. We're going to have categories again, so the young'uns can be as involved as anybody who we might consider a pro to be involved in the s'more tasting contest. And there'll be lots of other things going on. We're hoping to have celebrity photo ops, as well as autograph sessions with hockey players, fire pits, warming tents, things like that, just to have a sense of camaraderie for this event. It is such an opportunity. So that is a little bit about what we're hoping to have. We're also going to be encouraging the downtown businesses that day to have a good old-fashioned sidewalk sale, where they're going to put out their tables in front of their stores and have the town folk that are all down there enjoying the festivities to wander around and also visit the stores down there. Yeah. The other event that we have coming up with the Chamber of Commerce is the Business Excellence Awards. And that's going to be on January the 31st, 2020. It's going to be at the Civic Center at 6 o'clock with cocktails, followed by a plated dinner, and then the awards. It's going to be quite a soiree, and it's going to be themed as a night in Venice. There'll be 11 awards that will be handed out that evening. Some of the awards are going to include things like a Youth Entrepreneur of the Year, Agribusiness of the Year, Downtown Business of the Year, Nonprofit Business of the Year, and others like that. Nominations are rolling in now. Thank you to a couple of people that have helped us with getting that going. Especially on the electronic end, it's really paid off. And there will be a panel of judges. And the panel of judges are that we're going to be looking for are respected, retired business people in our community that will be getting all of the nominations, and they will be the people that will decide and pick our winners for us. I also want to thank many people that have helped orchestrate this and help us to get it organized, including the town of Strathmore. Their support, encouragement has been terrific. so far, and I wanted to thank them for that. As well as our events chair, Heather Yamans, and her committee have been very hard trying to put this together, and Alexander Ross has been an excellent guide for us and giving us lots of advice to keep us moving in the right direction. So thank you to everybody that's been involved in that. But why I'm here tonight on that end is because we want to invite you guys to this event. We have a beautiful table of 8 reserved for you guys for that evening, and we hope that we can have mayor and council there that evening. It should be a terrific night. Yeah, that's everything. Any thoughts or questions from anybody?
Thank you very much, Haley, for your presentation. Councillor Peterson.
Haley, I just want to say that this is why this town will be okay. It is because of the professionalism, the visionary enthusiasm, the hard work and heart that this new chamber is showing, and so much credit to you for your leadership and your team. And I'm immensely grateful, as I know my council is, for what you're bringing to the table. I'm so appreciative, and of all the other work you do in community, in volunteerism.
Thank you very much, Councillor Peterson. I have terrific mentorship in Councillor Sobel and others, and so thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Haley, for coming. This is great information. I will throw this out there as much as I can. I really liked the direction and the whole kickoff idea. It's about bringing people together, and that's, I think, what this event, like, everybody talks about the economic spin-offs and stuff like that, but it's, truly a one-in-a-lifetime event where it can bring Strathmore together. And I really appreciate all of the efforts and everything going into that, as well as the business awards, because it's really nice to showcase what we have.
Yes.
And I think that's a great way to appreciate the excellence that, is all around us.
That is
Thank
our
you very much.
community. Yes. Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor Corbeil. Yeah, it's appreciated.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Corbeil. Corbeil, is it? Yes, thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Worship. I've been watching what other municipalities have been doing with hometown hockey. Fort McMurray and Red Deer, man, it's a tough act to follow. But you know what? You're doing it here, girl. You are not only involving the entire community, but different levels. You're bringing in the Wheatland Kings, you're bringing in youth, you're bringing in past businessmen, you're tying in the old with the new. I really, really love this, and I really am so appreciative of your leadership and what you are doing in terms of vision for the chamber, because I think this is the time where we can really engage our businesses, some of whom are really hurting. And this is a way of letting our people know that by shopping on Amazon and by doing online shopping, we're not supporting our community, and these are the ways that you can. And so let's have those sidewalk sales. Let's get that last minute shopping done. Let's have, a table just for guys who haven't even shopped yet and get them out there. And I'm really excited about being available for all of this. I can't help, though, being a judge of the s'more contest, it's opened up my eyes. Now I'm driving down the highway, I'm seeing marshmallows in fields, and I'm wondering, how can we bring those marshmallows to Strathmore? With a couple pallets on the end, they would look like a s'more.
Gosh.
So, I'm going to challenge you, Haley. I'm going to challenge you to make some really big s'mores.
Yes. I love vision.
I think we
Thank you
can
for
do
that.
it. I think we can do it.
I think we can too.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Councillor Bauer. That is excellent.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Sobel.
that.
I thought edibles weren't available till the new year.
At the risk of repeating some comments today, and I normally would just say everything's been said, but being on this committee, I really feel that I have to say that Haley's been is one of the main reasons why our chamber has developed into such a focused and enthusiastic group of people who are determined to support the growth of our business community. It's just a pleasure for me to be at this committee under your leadership, Haley, and you are a leader, and you need very little assistance from anybody. You know what's going on. thank you for your, the enthusiasm that you bring and for all of the volunteer hours. And I know, I don't think anybody would believe how many volunteer hours this person puts into our town. And it's only for our town, so thank you so much. We're looking forward to all these events, and I'll be making sure that our group here keeps is aware of the fact that they should be at the tables. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Appreciate
Thank you,
that.
Councillor Sobel,
Yes.
as well. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation, Haley. I just wanted to thank you for everything that you and your fellow reps do, but also everything that you do for our community through the chamber, and I just I have nothing but great things to say about you, and I'm very impressed with you as a person and as a business person. So thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't anticipating or expecting any of that tonight, so thank you to all of you for that, very much so. I'm only as good as my team, and truly, the people that I have on our committee we're very fortunate for who we have, so thank you, everybody. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery, and again, thank you on behalf of the council. I again echo their comments. I've seen you at so many events, and you put in so much time, and you can tell there's a spirit that's on this chamber now that is something else. And I appreciate the fact that you're bringing another event downtown when some of us have gone to conferences on saving downtowns. That's one of the things they say is you have to have events downtown. You have to find ways to bring people there. So this is a great idea, and thank you again.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, that brings us to item 6, consent agenda. Nope, we're good. 7, confirmation of minutes. 7.1, the adoption of the regular council meeting minutes for November 20th, 2019. Councillor Bauer.
I move that council adopt the November 20th, 2019 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. I don't believe we have any. Did I do that?
That was for me.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah, because there was no mistakes.
Oh, nice. Awesome. That's really good. So way to go. I don't believe we have any tabled items or reports from administration. 9.1, you've been waiting a long time too. You've aged quite a bit since the start of this meeting.
Wow. Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate
You
that.
grew a beard in that time you were waiting. 9.1, Family Center Facility Enhancement Report. Mark Pretzloff, welcome.
Thank you. I thank Your Worship. Yeah. All right. Your Worship and Council, I'm here to speak tonight regarding the Family Center Facility Enhancement. As you can see, I have a presentation prepared, or I can lead directly into questions from Council if you wish.
Councilors, did you want to see the presentation, or I'd be good to have it online. Sure, we'll have you present if you don't mind, and the people at home who are glued to their monitors can watch this.
All three of them. That's, yeah.
I just want to say hi to Councillor Cox.
I'd also like to say hi to Chuck, just because Chuck. Anyways, in September 2019, administration requested $30,000 for architectural and engineer assessment of the Family Center to determine the viable delivery of recreation and child, youth, and family programming within one building. This was the first step in the Canada Infrastructure Grant, which is a large-scale grant that was created through the federal government. Thank you. The funding streams were as follows: climate change, adoption and disaster mitigation, environmental quality, community and culture and recreation infrastructure, and rural and northern community infrastructure. To access this program, an expression of interest application is needed, and the application required the building assessment of the existing facilities and proposed project plan. The project goal was to illustrate an approach to develop a family center site as a means of strengthening the opportunity for recreation and community involvement. This included zoning for allow additional use on site, as well as providing appropriate homes for existing programs that may be underserviced in the current location. with working with our consultants here, possible building upgrades that we kind of identified are up there on the screen. I won't go through all of them, but some of the items that we were looking at was expanded seating, increasing the current capacity, more dedicated change rooms, dedicated fitness training equipment areas, dedicated office spaces, upgrading the in-game experiences, new entryways, and new fitness, and then obviously the idea of another outdoor artificial ice service, or potentially an indoor artificial ice service. This slide here shows you one of the options, or one of the phased-in approach on how the three buildings, the curling rink, the youth club, I should say, and the family center could all be connected. Here's one of the possible options for expanded bleachers and change rooms that could be added to the family center. A possible program opportunity space within an increased area. And I should stress to council that these are all options that the consultants came with. This is not necessarily a finalized plan, and it can be also be phased in approach. Here's one of the here's what we're labeled as option 3. This gives you a blueprint, or a framework of what the existing spaces would look like. You can see the existing arena space and the additional add-on of additional change rooms, as well as a covered indoor ice surface area, as well as the connecting hubs between the youth hub and or the curling rink. The next steps, should council wish to proceed down this road, is to determine true construction cost estimates. We do have some that's included within the consultant's report. Complete the expression of interest, and then figure out what exactly is remaining in that pot of money that's available from the federal government. So at this time, if your worship or council has any questions, I'm prepared to answer.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for that presentation, and it's much appreciated. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Worship. So my first question is, well, I guess so one, and it's on page 11 of, sorry, hold on. Okay, so it's talking here about an additional ice sheet, and I believe it's talking about the curling rink. Is that one of the things that was looked at?
No, the additional sheet of ice is
Yeah.
what we labeled as option 1, 2, or 3
Right.
in the consultant. And that would be, initially was a outdoor recreation pond,
Okay.
an outdoor recreation uncovered sheet of ice, and then the third option would be a covered recreation, covered hockey, covered
Okay.
indoor.
Like the reason why I'm asking is just I'm a little bit like, could you just, because and I'm assuming probably the picture is correct, but in this in section 3.3 for recommendations, it talks about the additional ice sheet, and it just says the most feasible location is would be to the north with the orientation parallel. So I'm assuming that was a mistake.
The ideal location in terms of where it would be from the existing plant
Yeah.
would be directly north.
Oh, okay. But they went to the east with this plan here, though.
Directly to the north is the Ag Society lands.
yeah.
So obviously, for
I see. Okay.
us to proceed in that avenue, it would be an entirely different scope. Like I said, the reason why the east was selected is it was the best optimal spot to maximize, to increase seating in the Gold Arena, as well as provide that other sheet of ice.
Your worship, if I may just add to that, one of the things to keep in mind is when we first started working on this report, council was considering a junior A hockey team, and so some of the decisions we made were influenced by those discussions, hence the east direction with the additional seating on the Gold.
I see. Okay. And so the second question I have just has to do with the next step, I guess. And so we will be submitting this as part of our expression of interest?
At this time, this report is presented for council for information purposes only.
Yeah.
We would look for, try to follow the recreation master plan that's hopefully going to be adopted by council. And one of the steps within there is to determine a needs assessment that's the recommendations through the master plan, that for any future growth, that a needs assessment is conducted first before we go down any avenue considering these type of decisions.
Oh, okay. Because I was just under the impression that the whole reason why we did it was for this particular grant that we were going to be applying for.
Initially, that was a part of the process.
Yeah.
Now, if council wishes us to proceed with that action, we can go down that road. Based on the research we know about that grant, is they're looking for project-ready shovels in the ground.
Okay.
Ideally, that would be the optimal choice. That may determine whether the grant is successful or not.
I see.
Can I add to that? Your worship, if I may add as well, part of the expression of interest would require council to, through a motion of council, commit to funding their portion of the project should it be successful, even at the expression of interest time. And I believe it's a 50-50 max grant for the project.
All right, so, Mel, can we,
Can we count on you?
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Mel is absolutely in shock.
Daggers, there's daggers.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you for this report. I had a couple questions for you. Is that rink, the third option that's covered, is that a full-size rink?
Yes, through the chair, that would be a full-sized rink. We'd have to explore whether, the seating arrangements and whether seating can be added to it. As you can see by the illustrations, there is adequate room for skating and as a practice rink. We'd have to look to see if we wanted to add more seating. That wasn't a part of our initial conversations with the consultants.
Because that would be a concern of mine, is I don't want to have another blue rink. We can't. And then my other question is, if we were going to move forward on this, I would really, really like to see some consultation with a lot of the associations that already use the arena to see what they would actually need, want, blah, blah, blah.
I think that's where the needs assessment would speak volumes in terms of what the recreation master plan would require, and that needs assessment would require or necessitate a conversation with all the user groups, not just within that building, but the entire town, to determine the top priorities, and then give council some information as a
Insight.
direction.
I do like the fact that we're trying to connect and make, instead of these recreation facilities all over, connectivity is great. So like curling rink, and even eventually if you could go to the pool and stuff for like one center would be phenomenal. I know it's a long ways out, but anyway, I was just had those few questions on this, but thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Corbeil. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Worship. And I would like to just extend on Councillor Corbeil's comments there. I really believe that in terms of being sustainable for the future, that connectivity is the way to go. I've always wondered why we call the arena the family center, when the only thing you can do there is go to one of two arenas. And, it's not really a multi-purpose complex. I would love to see these all connected so that we could, as families, be able to go from one to another, and it would save us in terms of operations cost. It would save us in terms of manpower. It would save us, from having to duplicate some of the things that we're doing now in another location. For example, years ago they talked about having it on the other side of the highway. Well, this makes sense to me, and I just would like to, Mark, have you speak on, in the interest of transparency for our community. Council approved $30,000 for this master plan, and could you please tell me how much was spent?
I believe it was just under $30,000. It's approximately $27,000 and plus tax, obviously, so well within the budget.
Okay,
This is the architectural and engineering assessment of the building.
okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. So with the master plan, that was a different
Project entirely.
project,
Yeah.
and we had expensed, or we had approved expenses to what amount for that?
Your worship, the budget was for 95,000 for the master plan, and it came in on budget.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bauer. I have one question, Mark. Should this go forward in the not too distant future, what disruption would occur at the family center as far as the teams and regattes, hockey?
Your worship, it's difficult to say. Obviously, this assessment is a preliminary assessment. Anytime you start a construction project and Mr. Roycroft can discuss shovels in the ground, or once you poke holes in walls, you never know what you're going to realize. Our elevator is a good example of that. We're dealing with a building that's 25 years old, so it's difficult to say. Obviously, should this move forward, we would obviously look to minimize the impact of our user groups. And
Problem is you'd be in a construction zone and a lot of demolition.
in some elements of it, I would imagine, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mark? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we need a motion to accept for information? Thank you. Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
I move the council accept this report as information.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Which brings us to 9.2, Lakewood Meadows Pedestrian Bridge Funding Model. Justin, are you speaking to that?
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I have a brief presentation if you'd like one.
Sorry, pardon me?
Oh, I said I have a brief presentation if you'd like one.
Council, do you want a presentation on this? No, I think we're okay. Seeing that.
Do you not say it?
Then I'm looking for a motion. And if we want to explain to the people back home, we've been given a lot of information on the procedure that could be followed to look at a funding model to add a pedestrian bridge that would link the northern part of Lakewood Meadows to Hillview. And that can be found in the package, and I guess that would be it, that I would say as a preamble. Councillor Montgomery.
I will move the council approve the Lakewood Meadows pedestrian bridge funding model.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on that motion? Councillor Bauer.
I only would like to add, Your Worship, to your comments, that this is so needed and necessary in our community. There are so many youth right now that in the summer are being forced to walk on a very busy secondary highway in order to reach schools and other bus stops and that types of things. I really am so thankful to you and your team for working with the developer and finding this solution, because up till now, pedestrian access was only able to happen in wintertime, when the canal was dry and when people are able to go. And this will help people walking their dogs, it will help children, it will help families, and I only look forward to more connectivity between our neighborhoods so that they don't feel so separate. And I'm embracing Lakewood Meadows because this is going to be a very important community in our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. And just before we call that vote, we didn't call a vote, did I?
No.
Yeah, I'll just wait till Jason gets back. So let's talk. Just no. Actually, sure. Yeah, and I just wanted to echo Councillor Bauer's comments. Just that I commend admin and staff for coming up with this idea and working with the Lakewood developers. Not only is it a good idea to link the communities, but I think it makes far more financial sense than trying to do an extended pathway right now along North Boundary Road to link up with the 817 pathway. So this is a much shorter, much more financially sound idea. I think it's going to be something that's really good for our public in that area. So the funding source for the proposed Lakewood Meadows pedestrian bridge will be from the sanitary levy account, the same account from which the town has and would be repaying Lakewood Meadows for the North Boundary Water Grid main. So if you could sum that up in just a sentence or two, Justin, how it's come about, what is it actually, how is it going to be done?
My layman's terms, because I am extremely layman in terms of finances, is that our good finance department has explained that this amount was a liability for the town, and now that it's been removed, it's now become a revenue source that we can now use to fund the bridge. Good?
Well done.
And I didn't even need a calculator for that.
And if I could add, the beauty of this is this funding model that you guys have come up with, plus the Strathmore Commons enhancement that we are doing, and if WID opens and allows access on their maintenance bridge, in 1 year we will add 3 bridges to our canal system. So we have a motion on the floor. Jason, do you need to hear the motion, or did you present it? You
The new
presented it.
I do want to say that I really want to commend Neil with Lakewood. Neil has hosted a lot of open houses with the community, and he has really built some excellent relationships with the residents, and he's really heard and reacted to their concerns and come to us and looked for a solution. So we're very lucky to have a great developer that's not just interested in just building and selling, but building a great community and working with the residents. So I wanted to
That's great news.
Commend Neil for that. So
Thank you. And Jason, you don't need to have the motion explained because you made it. So we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Justin, for all your work and your presentation. 9.3, Alberta Shallow Gas Tax Relief Initiative. Mel Teedy? No? Sorry. You're not Mel Teedy.
No.
Would you mind introducing yourself so that I don't think all of us
Worship.
know
Yeah,
you.
You bet. Okay, sounds good, buddy. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. My name is Alan Down. I am the Manager of Assessment and Tax for the town of Strathmore. I'm here to talk to you this evening about the Shallow Gas Tax Relief Initiative. I'm just wondering, would you guys like a presentation, or do you want to vote on it, or?
I think we know why it's happening. We're familiar with what the situation is. Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I would move that council support the Shallow Gas Tax Relief Initiative from Alberta Municipal Affairs, suggested by Alberta Municipal Affairs, and cancel 35% of the property taxes for Ember Resources and issue a tax cancellation notice in the amount of $5,948.80. Council further authorizes the CAO to sign the certification form attesting to the cancellation of the property taxes in the amount of $5,948.80.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson, for that very soothing reading. I appreciate that. That was well done. You've all heard the motion on the floor. Any discussion, Councillor Sobel?
No discussion, but I think it's important that the summary be read on this to give a little bit of. Do you want to go ahead?
No, you go.
So I'll just read this because I think it's important to know. Alberta Municipal Affairs has requested the cooperation of municipalities in providing financial relief to shallow gas producers. The relief is to provide a cancellation of 35% of municipal taxes on shallow gas wells and pipelines. Municipal Affairs have provided the town with the list of properties that qualify under this program, and obviously Ember Resources is one of those. The 35% represents the approximate amount of education tax out of the total taxation. The province will reimburse the town of Strathmore with an equal credit through the education property tax requisition. So.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Sobel. And we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? And the motion is carried. I thought you were just,
No, I just wanted to, I was voting for it.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Down for giving 2 hours of your life that you'll never get back.
It was time well spent.
And if, I was going to ask you if there was anything you needed to add.
No, one of the most important factors, I think, when considering this is the fact that the net cost of the town of Strathmore will be negligible, that we will be receiving education tax credits that are equivalent to this. So it's not actually going to cost the town any money, but it will help to provide tax relief to those companies that are affected. Mm-hmm.
thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Thank you very much, Mr. Down.
Thank you.
That brings us to committee reports, item 10, 10.1, reports from council committees. Anything from council? Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I'll provide a more in-depth report in writing in the third week of this month, but I just want to say that the Seniors Advisory is preparing to come before council in February with reports on a multitude of activities that they've been undertaking. And they are, I'm grateful to Councillor Cox for leaving me with this very active and vital group. And so I just want to say that they have requested of Ms. Hemmerluck permission to speak to the February meeting on current initiatives, and also to say that the third Wednesday of every month, they continue to have coffee meetings, which are having in excess of 30 people almost every occasion. So they have their upcoming, their December session is on fire safety and will be presented by Deputy Chief Unsworth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other reports from council committees? Seeing none? Do we need a motion to accept that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Corbeil.
Move the council accept the council committee minutes as information.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Motion is carried. 10.2, council reports from committees on which they sit. Councillor Sobel.
Just a very brief statement in regards to the Chamber of Commerce. Earlier this afternoon, we did have a Chamber of Commerce board meeting, and the board overwhelmingly agreed to offer Sean Kissling the position of Executive Director for the Chamber. Sean has been a director for quite some time, and so the learning curve is going to be very, very short with this man. We feel extremely fortunate to have Sean as our new ED. He's just hitting the ground running. He was asked when he wanted to start in this position, suggesting perhaps the new year, and he said, "How about tomorrow?" So he'll submit his letter of resignation and as a director and start working tomorrow. I think it's a real big step for our organization. That's all I have, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any other reports?
Councillor Bauer, do you want to talk about the 25 ways? Although I didn't prepare for this, I really think it's important for our community to know that one of our board directors for the Strathmore Overnight Shelter, Melissa Mass, is currently doing her degree in social work with the University of Calgary, and she has decided as a project to use the Strathmore Overnight Shelter and its ability to touch people within our community in a very, very interesting way. And it's just this campaign that she has right now, partnered with local businesses and Elizabeth Karp, our executive director. And she has really gone to the essence of what the shelter is all about. And it's about meeting the needs of the people in our community, but doing it in a loving way, the way that Jesus was able to do it, and the way that is represented in the Bible. And she has included 25 ways from the 1st of December to the 25th of December of 25 different ways that you can help the shelter, and included a scripture passage with each different ways, and really tailored that to be so meaningful. And the social media response so far has been fabulous. We've had a radio spot at the Strathmore Now at our radio station 104.3, and we've also had lots of donors within the community and even people within the county just really giving of their heart, and I know that it's just not going to stop. So if you get a chance, please share this page and please direct traffic. And I know that the councillors here, I think some of you have already done that, and I thank you for helping to support the shelter. They have made, under the direction of Joanne Nelner, the volunteer coordinator, the doors have only been open a year and they're already ready to expand. And the amount of people that they are including, over 6,000 hours of volunteer time. And I just see this being such a positive place in our community. I have started volunteering there. I've only volunteered twice. And I can honestly say that this has filled my cup more than a lot of the other things I do within the community. And I'm not doing it as a counselor, I'm just doing it as a regular person. And I'm loving it. So I encourage all of you, if you have any desire in your heart to help the shelter, please don't hesitate and come out. I hope that was long. That was long, yes, please.
Permission of Deputy Mayor? I just want to, I really appreciate that heartfelt commitment, Lorraine, that you exhibit and reflect what Melissa Massey's doing. But I also want to point out from a very clinical and economic perspective that there are communities across Western Canada that we heard about at AUMA this year, and that we've seen on the national news and on local news around throughout British Columbia and in southern Alberta, where communities are destroying tent cities. They're trying to find capacity to house people who are in need of emergency housing and shelter. And I commend this community, including this previous councils, for what they've been able to do and all the support that Harvest Healing Church has taken on with all the rest of the community to be able to mitigate those factors in our community. It really is impressive. And I'm grateful, as you said, to everybody that's pitched in on this social media campaign. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Deputy Mayor Corbitt.
Thank you, Your Worship. A quick thing about the Rogers Hometown Hockey. I would like to let people know that there are both paid positions through Rogers Hometown Hockey. If you want, you can go to the Strathmore website, and it's on there. They want like paid brand ambassadors. And then they are also looking for volunteers for the ball hockey, popcorn, Rogers Community Zone, and Play Mobile. Tons of things. I will update more of those next time or whatever, but I just wanted to key in on the volunteers and the actual paid positions Rogers Hometown Hockey will bring.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Corbeil. Councillor Bauer.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, but I just do want to also give a shout out to the Strathmore Municipal Library. If councillors, you have not had a chance to look at the statistics, but from 2018, the Strathmore Library had 4,885 library visits, and that's up in 2019 to 8,018 visits. So they have almost doubled their number of visits. So I really just want to say thank you to the previous council who allowed for the expansion of the library, because it is definitely being embraced by our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Bauer. That brings us to items directly related to Deputy Mayor Corbitt.
I will accept the
thank
reports
you.
for information.
Thank you. You all heard the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Items directly related to council, item 11. Seeing none there, we don't have any urgent business. Item 14, questions between councillors and/or council statements. Seeing none. Administrative inquiries, none.
There's one.
No.
Oh, gotta bring it up.
I move to go in camera?
Thank you. We have a motion to go back in camera. All in favor? And we're going back in camera at 9:12 PM.